What is going on, everybody? It is Bush Fishing and we are back. In today's video we're going to be reassembling the Chevy 5.7 or Indmar Monsoon 350 SS. It is a marine engine. In this video we're going to be going through every single torque spec, every single torque pattern, everything that you need to know to reassemble these. We're not going to be missing a single step. We're going to be reinstalling everything that came off, as well as a few new parts like oil pump, fuel injector O-rings, new timing gear and timing chain, full new gasket set, stuff like that. But before we get into this video, I'm Teo. If you guys want any of the merch, first link down in the description below. If you want any Bush Fishing merch, it's also down there. Some of the tools that I'm going to be using today are off Amazon. Like, I have a ring compressor kit. I'll have everything linked down below, as well as part numbers. But if you guys haven't watched the previous videos, make sure to watch those, as you get to see this thing coming out of the boat, getting torn down, and then getting diagnosed. This is going to be probably a pretty long video, just because I'm going so in depth with it, showing every single torque spec, and every torque sequence, stuff like that. So I might split it up into two, but make sure to stay tuned. My plan for this is, right now it is 4:04. It's already dark out on a Saturday. I'm gonna try and get the whole bottom end reassembled and heads on and valves lashed today, and then finish up tomorrow. But we'll just have to see how far we get. But without further ado, we're gonna get the two pistons that I took out back in, and I'll show you guys how to do that, and we'll get into the video. Alrighty, let's get started. You guys are getting the top-down view. This piston ring compressor set came off Amazon. Like I said earlier, it'll be linked down below. You have literally every size you could ever imagine, and how they work is you grab one of them, say this one, and you grab your pliers, and essentially your pliers sit in holes on either side of it, and when you pinch it, it squeezes them together. So we've got our rings installed on our pistons. We'll go into how they should get spaced apart in a second, but for now, I'm gonna pick the size that best fits this piston. Alrighty, this is going to be the one that's almost touching closed. Alrighty, so to begin with, looking at our piston, we have our oil control rings and an oil control spacer, which is down here, and then we have two compression rings. The two compression rings need to be 120 degrees apart. Doesn't matter where you start, whether you start from the top or the bottom, but you're going to start somewhere. So I'm going to have the gap on the top compression ring facing me. I'm going to rotate this one, the second one, 90 degrees, and then a little more, that'll give me 120 degrees. For the oil control rings, we're going to want these gap at least 90 degrees apart from each other. So I'm going to go at least 90 from the second compression ring, just for safety, and I'm going to go 90 degrees the other way on the top oil control ring. Just like that. They're all gapped. You want to make sure they're loose and free-flowing. They're all set differently. Just make sure you double check before you put the tool on. Next up, we're going to slide the tool over. Try not to spin any of the rings. We're going to get our tool in here. To get the tool on, you just start with one side, get the holes lined up, come to the other side, pinch, and just like that, our rings are compressed. You can see, squeeze them a little harder to get them to go all the way in. We're ready to go bring it over to the motor. Alrighty, next up, second piston. She's all lubed and everything. We're making sure that it's going in the right way, which it appears to be. We're going to slide it in, get the piston to sit in there till it's sitting with the face of the ring compressor tool. Just like that. You want to make sure it's as level can be. And we've got our bearing shell in there. So what we're going to do, take the end of a wooden hammer and just begin pounding it down, making sure that our rings aren't sticking, coming down to the bottom and making sure that we're not going to hit our crank. Just like that. The oil out of your mouth. Now we're going to come down here and we're going to guide the end on. Pop it on the rest of the way. So those are our two pistons that were pulled out, reinstalled. Check the bore, everything's good, nothing's scratched. Now we're going to flip the engine up and get the caps on. Alrighty, next up, I'm just using regular engine oil. You're going to get some, we want to lube where the bearings are going to be. So don't be shy, get a lot of oil on there, get it in between the two piston ends. It's not going to hurt anything if you put too much, it's just going to make it a little bit more of a mess. Once we get the oil on, we're going to get the caps on. It's important that if you're reusing these parts, the bearings go facing the same direction. So I've got these marked, if you can see that number 8 on the end of there, that's going to line up with ours. And they'll face the same way. So I've got cylinder 8, got my marking for number 8 there. The edges of this are rounded and straight. They will correlate, so straight and straight, rounded and straight, or rounded and rounded. Just gonna kind of wiggle it on. You want it to seat all the way before you ever tighten it up. If it doesn't seat all the way, something's wrong and there's not enough gap in between these. So with those on, we're gonna get the nuts just lightly tightened down, and we're gonna do the same with the other side. So just lightly put these down until they're seated. Same thing with the other side, get a little oil on the inside of the bearing. We're gonna line them up so that they're facing the same way and the bearing shells will mate happily, and just kind of wiggle them down till they seat. Just like that, both seated. We got a little bit of play and a little bit of play. We'll check that afterwards because there is a spec. You put a feeler gauge in between, so we'll check that, but first we'll get these torqued down. Alrighty, so on our first pass, we're gonna go to 20 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on our second pass, we're gonna go 70 degrees past that. So I'll set it up to 20 foot-pounds. It's gonna be 9/16 socket on here. I'm gonna snug them both down first. So I'm starting to feel pressure there. Go to the other side and feeling pressure there. I'm gonna start with the other one so you guys will hear my torque wrench. So there's 20 foot-pounds. 20 foot-pounds there. Same thing on the other one. Cylinder 8. Now if you guys are doing like me with a big 1/2-inch torque wrench, 20 pounds doesn't feel like a whole lot. Just be gentle and trust your torque wrench. Make sure it's calibrated. Here we come for the torque. There's 20. Now we're gonna set it up for 70 degrees. So there's 70 degrees. We're gonna start on this one. And here we go. $70 degrees on that one. Same thing here. All right, I didn't clear it out on that one, but same thing. 70 degrees there. 70 degrees, those are both torqued down. Alrighty, so next up, you're gonna take a little mallet and you're gonna tap on the rods and rod caps. All you're essentially doing is getting it to release and sit where it naturally wants to sit. You're gonna grab your feeler gauge. This is 10 thousandths. The spec for this is 6 thousandths to 21 thousandths max gap. So this being the 10, I'm gonna slide it in here. I can get it in. Hopefully you guys can see that. I'm getting it in and I'm feeling pressure on it. So it's probably, honestly, the right size for this, but I can get it in there in between. So this is within spec for the distance they have. Wouldn't really want it any tighter, and it'll have room for wear in the future. But with how this goes in, I'm happy with that, and it's pretty even all the way around. That's how you check that. You will need a feeler gauge. Alrighty, next up we are going to be installing the new timing chain and cam sprocket. So I'm gonna flip the motor right side up, and we will get working on that. Alrighty, so before we take anything off, we have the timing marks lined up, and cylinder 1 is at firing position. So cylinder 1's at top dead center of the compression stroke, ready to fire. So we know we've got that by these 2 timing marks lined up. We're gonna take off these 3 bolts, which are going to be 1/2 inch. If anybody at Milwaukee's watching this, you want to get me the little ring that keeps the socket on, that'd be sweet. Alrighty, with those 3 bolts off, there is a little guide pin in here. Just kind of wiggle it back and forth, drop it down, and the entire thing comes out as one unit. Alrighty, setting that to the side, we're gonna open up our new Cloyd's timing gear set. Alrighty, so we have new cam gear and a new timing chain. Alrighty, once we've got our timing marks lined up and it over the dowel, we're gonna hold pressure on it and get these bolts started. Alrighty, so with those bolts installed, we're gonna kind of hold pressure on it upwards, and we're gonna get them snugged up with the impact. And then we're gonna grab our torque wrench, let it calibrate itself, and we're gonna go to, and we are doing 18 foot-pounds. So that is fully torqued. We've still got a little play in here, and we are gonna check the spec for it, but it is a little bit loose for my liking, but the cam can't rotate at all like it could before. Alrighty, next up we're gonna grab our reluctor wheel, align it with the keyway / oil flinger, and we're gonna set it up in there, and we're gonna lightly tap it into place with a large socket. I'm gonna use this big thing. Fully seated. Alrighty, so apparently my gasket set straight from Indmar did not come with a new timing chain cover, which I thought that it would. It does not. So I'm gonna have to grab one tomorrow morning on my way over here, and we will finish this up, which kind of works out because it is getting late anyway. The rest of it should fly. It's just gonna be lashing the valves, which is pretty much the longest portion of any of this. The rest of it's just putting stuff back on and getting the torque specs in. Kind of sucks I didn't get to do more tonight. But yeah, soon our pile will shrink and we'll have a complete motor, and then I gotta figure out how the hell I'm gonna get it out of here because it is muddy and snowy out there. But then we're gonna install it in the boat. So for tonight, I'm gonna be done, and we will see you guys tomorrow morning. Alrighty everybody, we are back. It's the next day. I'm in a much better mood today, and we're gonna install this timing chain cover. Picked one of these up this morning. Now this is different. This one comes with the gasket on it. You can see it's got that little O-ring deal around and it's not full. We will be adding silicone to the corners here, but we'll do that when we put the oil pan cover on. For now, we're gonna replace the timing chain cover. We've got the relector ring on. This one came with a block off for the crank sensor. We're gonna steal this O-ring off of here and put it on the new crank sensor and then put it in, but we'll do that after we get this on. So for now, these bolts get torqued to 106 inch-pounds, which divided by 12 equals 8 point something foot-pounds. And there's no specific sequence on this, but just kind of use your head. Go left, right, kind of angle it just to make sure it all squeezes nicely. These bolts are held in. You can pretty much sit them up here just like that and start torquing them in. They're gonna be 3/8, and we'll go around and get that installed, do the crank sensor. Yeah, we'll be on our way. Doors are closed. Right now it is 12:44 on Sunday. I'm not leaving this shop till this thing's put back together. Then we'll figure out when to get the boat. But for now, finally got the propane deal figured out, so I have unlimited heat now. So that'll be nice. Once it warms up, you know, I'll start stripping for you guys. Side note, some guy commented on one of my impeller videos on Evinrude 75 horse. Said my new nickname's the Professor. So you can address me by that now in the comments. Alrighty, we will grab our 3/8 and get these snugged up. First pass, I'm just gonna get them all kind of tightened evenly and snugged down. Second pass, I will torque them in the sequence that I stated before. Look at it and see when it says 9 foot-pounds. So there we're getting some pressure. 6, 7, 8, 9 foot-pounds there. Beep. 9 there, 9 there, 9 there, 9 there, 9 there, 9 there. And that is all of our bolts torqued for the timing chain cover. Alrighty, next up we're gonna go on our old timing chain cover. Got 5/16 bolt holding in the crank sensor and the little bracket. So we're gonna loosen this guy up. Now we can pop this whole deal out, just like that. You can see this crank sensor has got this seal on it, which is probably fine, but per the manual, we should replace it, so I'm going to replace it. Just kind of pinch it, get yourself a little gap, and slide it off. The old ring off. We'll do the same thing with that little plug they gave us. It's the exact same oil seal. You can take some of the oil off the crank sensor or off the old timing chain cover and just make sure you lube this O-ring. Slide it on there. We'll put it in the same orientation as it came out, pushing it straight in and kind of twisting as we push. We'll get the bolt holes lined up and then we'll install the bolt. This one gets torqued to 80 inch-pounds, which is equivalent to 9 Newton meters. I am going by feel on this one. Beep, 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 beep. There we go. Alrighty, crank sensor is installed, timing cover's done. We will come back to this later, putting the rest of the pulleys on, but I think we're done with the front of the motor for now. Alrighty, next up we have our new Melling oil pump. A lot of you guys had said some very good things about these and had some strong opinions about them. So we're putting a Melling back in, good pumps, and this is gonna be standard flow, standard pressure, because with all these bearings being new, it really doesn't need the high flow. First, we're going to take our oil pump drive shaft, dump her in the hole. Now, we've got guide pins where the pump sits. We are going to sit it down in there. Drive shaft is going to go in the hole, facing that way. We do not have the retainer ring because this is the updated one. We're going to locate the dowels. There is a spec for how far they sit out, but this is okay. Going to sit it down in there, just like that, and we're just going to get it aligned with the pump drive shaft. Alrighty, next up, with our oil pump in, we're going to grab our baffle, set it on there, because the baffle goes in between the bolt and the oil pump. We want to make sure that all of the lower nuts are touching, so adjust those accordingly, but you want to make sure they're not too high out. So with them torqued, these will all be touching. There is a spec for this. Alrighty, with all those on there, start with our oil pump bolt. Get it threaded in. Just get it threaded all the way down by hand before we torque it, and then we will get all of our deflector bolts on as well. Alrighty, first pass on the oil pump bolt is going to be 15 foot-pounds. And then it's going to be 65 degrees, so we'll get this one ran down. 15 foot-pounds. Now we're going to clear it out and switch it over 2 degrees. And we're going to do 65 degrees. So we got it on there. Got pressure on it. .65 degrees, and the rest of these bolts will be 30 foot-pounds. Alrighty, 30 foot-pounds starting in the center, working our way out. "30 foot-pounds. All torqued, that section's down. Now is where we will move on to the pickup tube for the oil pump. I have a little different situation. Alrighty, well, I'm having some trouble with the oil pan, but nevertheless, we're gonna get started with this balancer. Keyway, there is a little bit of sealant on there that you wanna get. You want to line it up on the keyway. You do just want to get it started in there. So I'm going to lightly tap it on. It is fit very tightly on there. All right, now that we got it on, we're going to grab our balancer tool. We're going to bolt the balancer tool on there. I think that's about as far as I can get it. There we go. And then we should be able to take this and just unthread that part. Look at that, how nice. There's our balancer installed. That's never coming off. Timing mark lines up, piston 1, top dead center. At this point, this one does not have the sticker for timing, so I got one from Jegs, 360-degree one. It'll just wrap around the balancer. This is what it looks like from Jegs. It's essentially just a sticker that you line up with 0-degree mark, and it wraps around the outside. Alrighty, next up we're going to do the crank pulley and the bolts. It's going to have 3 bolts around the outside, 1 down the middle. We're just going to get the middle ones started. I figured out why I'm confused. The manual that they give you is for the automotive version, which doesn't have the seawater pump bolted onto here. So we're not even going to put these 3 bolts on yet until we put on the actual impeller housing. For now, we're just going to do the center balancer bolt to 70 foot-pounds. Alrighty, 70 foot-pounds coming up. Turn her over to 70 foot-pounds and see if we spin the motor over. 70 foot-pounds there. Now we can move on. That took me quite a while to figure out. Okay, so I don't know if I recorded audio on any of that or any video of that side, but I will put up the torque pattern up there, the page from the manual for doing the heads, the same on both sides, and you can just follow that. Essentially, really tightening them all in sequence down to 22 foot-pounds, and then the long bolts, the longest bolts get 75 degrees, medium bolts, the 2 on the end get 65 degrees, and the small ones all get 55 degrees past 22 foot-pounds. So with both of the heads on, we're ready to keep on going. I believe now we're doing the push rods and rockers. Mine is going to be different because you most likely won't have a roller rocker setup. You will have the stock ones. The stock one, put the rods in, tighten everything down on each cylinder they're both let up on. You tighten them down until there's no lash and then crack them back. I'd have to look it up. That's going to be another one I'm going to have to put up on there. But since these aren't going to be the same as anyone else's, I'm going to blow through these and put them on. It is going to be a pain in the ass for me because I didn't take off the flywheel and I have to spin the motor over. So we'll figure out how I do that. After that, I think we're past. I think that'll be the most time-consuming portion of this. Yeah, the rest is going to be doing the intake manifold and putting the pulleys on, and that's when it'll really look like a motor again. Distributor timing is going to be fun. Yeah, let me get all these rockers in and we'll keep on moving. Alrighty everybody, we are back. Apparently I got limited battery today, but I'm going to start off on the intake manifold gasket. On each gasket we're going to put a 4mm bead on each end where it's going to touch the cylinder head. So we've got our Ultra Black by Permatex. Hopefully I got enough in here. But I have the tip cut pretty close to 4mm, and we're gonna put a little baby bead across it. It's like that. Same thing on the other side. One of them done. Gonna set this down. We're gonna use the alignment pins and set them down in there and just pop them in. So you can see our sealant's kind of splooging out. That's what we want. And we gotta be kind of quick for the next few steps because our sealant needs to be wet for all of it. So same thing on the opposite side. Line her up with our locator pins. Boom. All right, that's done. Next up, on each end, front and back of the motor, we're going to put a 5mm bead all the way along it, and then we're going to extend up on top of the gasket 1/2 inch. So I'm going to start 1/2 inch up, coming down, making sure to fill in that gap at the bottom. Put a 5mm bead all the way along this. Just like that. Now we are going to do the exact same thing on the rear of the motor. Same thing back here, 1/2 inch. Boom, just like that. Grab your lower intake manifold that's had the gasket scraped and it cleaned up. Now, you're gonna know which way it goes because the thermostat goes in the front. Ever so gently, you're gonna wanna lay this baby straight down on it. Just like that. You wanna make sure all your bolt holes are even. Just kinda walk around and verify all your gaps are closed. Alrighty, next up, drop your bolts in and just lightly thread them in. That's gonna be your sequence. We're gonna tighten the bolts to 27 inch-pounds, 106 inch-pounds, 11 foot-pounds. Alrighty, starting off with number 1 on there. I'm going to do my 2 foot-pounds or 27 inch-pounds by hand. Alrighty, next up we're going to do 8 foot-pounds or however many inch-pounds that is. Just like that. Last one, we will pull out the torque wrench because we are going to a whopping 11 foot-pounds. And 8. Just kind of want to visually look around at your silicone, make sure there's no massive gaps. Shouldn't be if you put the right amount, but just like that, intake manifold is installed. Alrighty, next up we are gonna spin the motor over until the compression stroke of cylinder 1. To do that, put a socket on your crank and I'm gonna put my finger over the spark plug hole. There's compression stroke. That baby's making some air. And we're gonna line up the mark on the balancer with the mark on the timing chain cover. So I'm on top dead center of the compression stroke on cylinder 1. Next up we're gonna take our distributor and we're gonna find the hole in it right there. And we're gonna line it up with the little paint mark on the shaft. Alright, so we're gonna hold the 2 of those together and the flat spot on the top we're going to have facing towards the front of the engine. And we're going to lock it in with the oil pump shaft and we're going to drop that hole in there. Alrighty, so with these lined up, just like that, after you get it aligned with the oil pump drive shaft, you'll drop it in. Then if you look where the rotor's pointing, there's a little number 8 that's cast into this. You're going to want to make sure that this is within a few degrees of that. If you didn't, that means that this came unaligned with the drive shaft. So you'll pop it out and do the same thing. Next up, we're going to install the clamp and bolt. Looks just like this. This goes around the base of it and then the bolt goes through. That's going to get torqued to 18 foot-pounds and it is a 9/16, but you cannot get a torque wrench in there. That feels like 18. That's tight. Next up, we're installing our cap and we're tightening these little screws up to 21 inch-pounds. Just like that, nice and tight. Apparently I wasn't recording that. I will show you on the next side, but new gasket, drop your valve cover in, and these bolts are getting tightened up to 106 inch-pounds. Alrighty, next up we have the circulation pump or water pump. This is going to be stud, bolt, bolt, stud. So opposites, and we're going to be throwing sealant on each thread. So on all the threads, we're going to dab a little bit of sealant on there. Throw these gaskets on. Alrighty, and these bolts are getting torqued to 33 foot-pounds. 33 foot-pounds on the wrench. $33 foot-pounds. Alrighty, we're pretty much at the end of what we can do with the manual. Just got dipstick tube left pretty much. So we're moving on to our own goodies. Next up, thermostat housing. We are going to grab a razor blade and clean off the old gasket. Okay, apparently I didn't record any of that. Thermostat housing went in, no torque on that, just put them tight. Next up we are doing circulation pump. 2 sets of bolt holes on here. One for marine, one for automotive. Find the one that fits for you and bolt them in. Final torque on these, 18 foot-pounds. I gotta stop talking like that. Oh, yeah. Alrighty, crisscross applesauce pattern. Who needs some pesky special tool when you got a screwdriver? I am back after my most magical piss. Next up, we are doing impeller. So I left most of this together, which worked out pretty darn well. This thing will bolt up one way. We're gonna have to rotate this in order to All right, finally we're back. I had a mishap earlier, but now I took care of it. Oh yeah, look at that. Peller housing is installed. This bracket gets bolted to something else. Next up, we are going to do, I don't even know what we're gonna do. Let's do the alternator bracket. Alrighty, alternator bracket, 2 bolts. Keep forgetting to push your cord. The missing spot right here is where the tranny cooler goes. That's with the transmission at the other shop. Really reef those bracket bolts down, that's important. Oh yeah, baby. Alrighty, this gap's gonna remain. Got our alternator installed. It's loose so we can get the belt on when the time comes. Next up. Oh, yeah, baby. We got this jobber right here. Might as well throw this in while we're here. Ah, yeah. Get that baby scooted up in there. Shove that in there. Just like that. We'll do these hose clamps up while we're in here. Look at this, starting to look like a motor again. What do I always say? We're not cavemen anymore. Look at that. Look at that. Lickety split. Bingo. Before we tighten that one up, we're gonna... Bingo. Bingo. That baby ain't going anywhere. All right, we might as well do the front engine lifting bracket bolt now that we have the thermostat in the way. Oh yeah, get that as vertical as we possibly can. Alrighty, next up we're doing fuel injectors. Alrighty, this is going to be the only one I'm going to show you. You got your fuel injector here, double O-ring. There's one on the bottom, one on the top. I got 8 fresh ones, and I only saw 2 that were pinched on the bottom, so I'm going to replace all 8 bottom ones. How to do it? Take your little pick, lay it in there below the O-ring, twist it up and over the top, and pull really hard and fling it off. Get the new one on. You might want to put a little grease on it first. You're going to hold the one end in and you're essentially just going to roll it over the rest of the way. When these get installed, we're going to grease the ever-living shit out of these. So 1, they don't get cut, 2, they don't get pinched and they slip right in. We've got the injectors installed in the rail with the new O-rings. We're going to flip it around, sit it how it's going to. What you're going to do is you're going to get these, we're going to get them set up in the holes. So we're going to line them up in the holes. All these O-rings are greased already. You're supposed to put the fuel line underneath cap and rotor, but I didn't. So one side, since these have a loose hose in between, you can do one side at a time. I'm all lined up. All 4 O-rings are sitting in there. They're nice. I'm going to put constant pressure and kind of wiggle them. And just like that, they all sat in. Nothing pinched, nothing broke. Same thing on this side. Line them up in the holes. Make sure all 4 are lined up. Wiggle and push. Sit right in, no sweat. No need to pinch O-rings. Next up, we've got our 4 little hold down bolts, Allens. These hold the rail down so your fuel pressure doesn't blow them off. With these fully, you'll know your O-rings and injectors are fully seated when your bolt holes line up. Same thing on the other side. This is our wiring harness. Now, when I do these, I make note when I take them off, like I said, you're gonna have an end to them. So this is my alternator end. So I know this end of the harness sits down here below the manifold. I know my ECM's in the back. So I'm gonna sit this thing kind of where it was, which would be above the bell housing. And we know we have our 2 harnesses for the injectors. So I've got that just like that. You can start plugging them in, but you wanna make sure it's kind of a heavy duty plug. Next up, we will take our base gasket for the upper intake manifold, kind of sit around there like so. It is one way. Alrighty, we've got this piece cleaned up. The easiest way I found to do this is throw like 3 bolts in. Oh, and figure out what you're hitting on. And then absolute... I don't know why I never record. Oh well.